Born and raised in the motherland, chasing a better life. Story of an immigrant.
Concrete pastures.
Concrete pastures.
What I like to see is a local Zambian or just wherever, someone that's local who gets their license and they start something no matter how small, and then they keep pushing it forward.
Yeah.
So they're not just sitting and waiting for someone to come put in all the money and the effort. They put in their effort. Our investors invested in us to go mine copper and cobalt. What we're looking to do is to build something that is that will last, right? That will self-sustain financially and will be there for generations. At the end of the day, I think one of the biggest risks is people, finding the right people to do the right work at the right time.
Hello, family. Welcome back to Concrete Pastures. I'm Nancy Mlimwasisi. I am super excited today to have our guest. He is a game changer in the mining space. For a lot of you that are not in the mining space and are hearing mining and are wondering why we're having this topic, I just want to give you a little bit of insights as to why mining is important in our world. Mining plays a crucial role in our daily lives and a global economy. In fact, the mining sector not only fuels the production of essential goods, but also supports millions of jobs around the world, contributing significantly to local and national economies. Let's meet our guest, Ayo Sopitan. Welcome to Concrete Pastures. How are you?
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh my God, let me tell the people who you are. You are the CEO and founder of Metalex Commodities. And the reason why you are here is because of the initiative that you are launching in Zambia. And I think it's going to be a great benefit to everybody around the world. So I am excited. I am extremely excited. And I want to start from this point. I usually start the podcast differently, but today I just want to dive into what you do and teach us what your industry is about. So for starters, let's break it down for everyone watching. When we talk about upstream and downstream in the mineral supply chain, what does that actually mean? And where does your company, Metalex, fit in that picture?
Yeah, no, that's it's an interesting technical question to start with. So upstream basically is the part that's closest to the ground where the extraction happens, and downstream is where consumption happens. Yeah. So the furthest downstream you can think of is consumer products or products that contain the metals that are extracted upstream, and the furthest upstream you can think of is basically the mine pit. So in terms of what Metalex plays, we started thinking that we were going to be a trading company. In fact, the name Metalex comes from metal exchange, which was meant to be solving the problem of price transparency for African metals. So basically anything that's not refined, there's no set price for, so it's all based on private negotiation. So we thought we would create a platform for that to become more transparent and fairer for the guys doing the work. But as it often happens, you start a business and then you learn a thing or two in the process and pivot and change direction. So we decided to be a physical commodity trader, meaning we would find a Nancy, the miner in the middle of nowhere, and say, hey, if we can aggregate from you and 1,000 more like you, then we can package and resell elsewhere in the world. And then gradually, what became clear was that the business that we really should be in is a fully vertically integrated business where we're upstream, we're midstream, and eventually we'll be downstream as well. But so just full integration, meaning extraction, processing, refining, and then trading that into the market. So that's where we play now.
Oh, very nice. Um, so having said that, you emphasize that execution risk, not geology, is the real constraint. Because I had to go on so many different platforms to see, there was so much research done on this, and I'm sure I didn't get all of the things that, you are doing. Just explain to us, in your experience, where does the risk show up most consistently on the ground?
There are all kinds of risks. I mean, you could have several days of conversation on risk, right? But I think there is the fundamental risk is the resource there. So, when I start digging, am I going to find what I'm looking for, right? I mean, resource risk, right? But luckily, in a lot of African jurisdictions, the resource risk, I mean, resource risk always exists, obviously, but you hear of, and I've seen places where people literally just start digging because, they found a rock that looked a bit strange. And they start digging and they start artisanal operations. And some of those things run for years and years, right? So resource risk is there, and there's a specific way to mitigate that, which is to do thorough studies and exploration, obviously. But another risk is, political risk. I mean, in Africa, changes in government can lead to drastic changes in business environments. Changes in government can lead to expropriation, even where your license to operate is withdrawn for different reasons.
Mhm.
There are risks around pricing, there are risks around execution. But at the end of the day, I think one of the biggest risks is people, finding the right people to do the right work at the right time. So, and the mitigant there is sometimes looking for people who have gone to certain places like Zambia as a strong Zambian and diaspora in places like Canada and Australia who've gone on to holds very high level positions in mining companies that sometimes you want to bring them back, or they've gone on to get educated in, Russia, China, Israel. And these are all places I'm mentioning places where I've hired people or I've employed people, Zambians who were educated in those places, including Cyprus as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of risk. But I think at the end of the day, moving stepwise, meaning taking things one step at a time, and trying not to solve all of the problems in one go, right?
Yeah.
Is probably the right approach. So no.
Talking about their artisanal small scale miners. So when some of the pictures that I saw online, I mean, it's just a ditch that just continues to go down. And I want to ask, how are you currently managing the interface between your operations and artisanal or informal mining activity around your asset? And how are you building anything also to um, protect those miners in let's say a ditch, for instance?
Yeah, so I mean, to answer that question properly, I would have to take a small step back. So when we first started the business, we were operating primarily in Nigeria. So I was born and raised in Nigeria. So it felt like a natural step to, if I'm starting a business that has to do with Africa, I'm going to go to Nigeria and start, right?
Okay.
Most of the mining activity in Nigeria is artisanal, right? So you're essentially, in my case, traveling from place to place, meeting artisanal miners, doing different things that you know that are very dangerous, very problematic. So I remember very vividly walking into a mine site in central Nigeria, and this lady was processing, they call it washing. So she gets this sand that contains tin and tantalum, which are
Yeah.
very high value metals, and she was hand washing it. And it's known to be radioactive, right? Like it contains thorium, which is, very radioactive. And what's worse is her kid, that looked like no more than 6 months, was sitting right next to her on the floor. And so there are many people who make a living doing that, uh, basically risking their lives so that Western um, demand for phones, TVs, cars, and whatever can be met, right? Or global demand, I should say, right? So these people are risking their lives. And then I also saw in a town in central Zambia called Cowboy where um, people are mining in an old dump. So essentially, when old mining companies, when they finished extracting their target mineral, they would dump their waste somewhere.
Mm.
And so as technology improves, those dumps become valuable because you can now go extract what's in there. So people go into these places and dig crawl spaces to get after minerals that are sitting in there. So you see people kind of in these ditches and they're at risk of collapse, right? So whatever they're crawling into can fall and
Yeah.
kill them, and it happens from time to time. So there's all of that activity, right? So as we developed our model, we said, okay, there has to be a way to incorporate these people into our operation. So what we tried in Nigeria was to give them personal protective equipment and so PPE, so gloves, boots, and work suits, and so on and so forth. So they're no longer working with just by hand. Goggles as well to protect their eyes, and then allow them to request access to equipment because so they can actually properly expand the mine pit so they can go after the things that they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So we piloted that. It worked pretty well. So we then said, okay, that's how we're gonna do our business going forward. So what we landed on was to say, hey, we have our own mine pits, we have our own equipment, we have a regular sort of mining operation. But as a matter of policy, we're going to source 30% of our mine input from artisanal miners.
Hmm.
And what that means is in an area like northwestern Zambia, where until very recently there wasn't a lot of uh, I would say substantial economic activity. I mean, there were pineapple farms, there was like honey processing and those types of things that happened. But in general, I mean, the scale of those things is not very high, right? So in those areas, we would then say, okay, look, we'll create a network that allows artisanal miners to legally mine on areas designated for them, with the government being aware, because the rules allow for artisanal mining licenses to be issued on large scale licenses. Um, and basically allow them access to rotational equipment, warehouses where they can store, testing facilities where they can test the quality, and so on and so forth. So they can almost operate as independent contractors. So within an ecosystem where our processing facilities are in the middle, if that makes sense. Yes.
Yes, it does. It does make sense. Oh wow, no, that's amazing. Because um, not too long ago, a lot of people, I was working with a partner, well, actually the person that requested you on the platform. So the platform is for the people. A lot of the times I get invites as to, can you please interview this person? Can you please bring this person on? And this is all great because people really want to learn what that individual is doing. And in your case, again, like I mentioned earlier, you are changing the game in the mining space. And I think it's going to be an answer to a lot of people that have been waiting to invest in some way in Africa. For me and uh, the person that requested you is we were trying to get a lot of investors. We live in New York. There's a lot of investors interested in investing in Zambia, buying minerals, but everybody comes and claims and says, oh, I do have this. And then when it's time to actually get results done, it just doesn't work. For many years, this was like 2 years. I don't know if you've experienced that. Uh, it was 2 years. And this brings me to the question of the instrument that you um, introducing for the for investors around the world. And you are collaborating with Veridico. I think I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, very decor. Yeah, yeah.
Veridico. And directly, you guys are piloting this in 2026, which is this year. Um, with the Zambian copper miner. This I got this from Africa News, really. And
Right.
that's where I think all of us have when I noticed this and when like, oh my God, what's happening? So the instrument is called the Stakeholder Prosperity Bond. Can you shed some light on that and how that's going to impact a lot of
Yeah.
people interested in
Okay.
investing in Africa?
So I think for proper context, I have to kind of describe our core activity in Zambia and then describe how this fits in. So
Yeah.
essentially, we have a 400 square kilometer mining license, set of licenses in Zambia.
Hmm.
We got those licenses in partnership with a local Zambian entity called Terra Metals. You know, a lot of publications or things that you would see about us in Zambia, you'll see them as well. They've been very strong partners for us. They've been Zambians with uh, good foresight that got into the game of owning licenses when many Zambians were thought of it as something that was for other people, right? So we got those licenses in partnership with that company. Um, and what we've done with those licenses is we took some of the exploration work that they did and we used that to guide some mining activity to start stockpiling in anticipation of the processing facility that we're building. So we started building a facility that can process 2 million tons of ore per year in Mwinilunga district. So yeah, in northwestern province. Um, so as of right now, we employ somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 people, and we expect that we would 4x that very shortly as we scale into production um, and then when we're there's so the plan is to further explore the mine, the license, the entire license area, and we suspect we're going to find a large resource. And when we find the reserve, we will build a refinery so we can actually produce finished copper metal from our location. Right.
Nice.
Now, when all of that is done, when these goals are achieved, we expect that we'll employ probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5,000 people, which would be good. It would make us very proud. But then we were reflecting on the fact that some of the existing players in Northwestern. There are very large established global players in Northwestern today. Um, uh, Even the ones that employ 10,000 people. What I notice when I go to where they work is there is a lot of economic activity around the mine, but as soon as you leave a certain radius, which is not very far, you go back to essentially prosperity starts to decline, right? So
Wow.
poverty, let's call it what it is. So you see
Yes, yes,
a
please.
lot of poverty, right? So we said, okay, is there something we can do? And but that's commercial in nature because what we didn't want to do was to say, well, we're going to put 1% of our net income into CSR. That hasn't worked anywhere to create prosperity at scale, right? Um, and if it hasn't worked, why do we keep trying it, right?
Yeah,
So we said, okay, what could be done to try to sort of look at the entire population of stakeholders and see how we can be additional to them, like that they're better off the fact, given the fact that we're there, right? So we did a stakeholder mapping. So stakeholder mapping, meaning just calling out all the different stakeholders. So it's the community being one key stakeholder, employees being another one, investors being another one, government being another one, the environment itself being another one. We did a thought out stakeholder mapping exercise, and then we put two columns and said, okay, what's a win for each stakeholder and what's a loss, right? And how do we build a business model where there's a win for everyone, and as much as possible, there's no loss, right? What we came up with was this idea of um, looking for ways to create non-core activities. And I'll tell you what I mean by non-core. So we're there to mine copper and cobalt, right?
yeah,
Our investors invested in us to go mine copper and cobalt. And to be fair to our investors, we should only focus on copper and cobalt, right? But then we said, okay, is there a way to think as an ecosystem builder, where you're building around the core activity as well? So non-core. So non-core meaning um, the things that the community already wants to do or already do. So they do beekeeping. So some of the best honey in the world comes from that area. In fact, you go to certain stores, fancy stores in London, and you see Moinilunga honey, which is
yes,
interesting.
yes.
And you wonder who in Moinilunga is benefiting from that. But you hear also about the pineapples. I personally, because I go there all the time. I mean, I spend about half my time in Zambia, and I see mushrooms, right? So these are just
Oh, love
like
them.
they're as big as umbrellas. I mean, these things are huge, and
Yes.
you know. and they're wild mushrooms. They're not cultivated. They're just growing in the forest. So, so people already do these things. So we said, well, is there a way to help them scale that activity up and then create a hub where they can bring all of their output and then create products that can be sold to market and then share the upside with the community, right? Because the stakeholder, they're key stakeholders. Why do we care about that? Well, there's this whole concept of social license to operate that mining companies have to think about all the time. So the government might give you a license and say, hey, go ahead and operate, right? If the community does not want you to operate, you're not going to operate, right? If the chief
Get it.
doesn't like your operations, there's no way for you to operate. So what
Yeah.
we're thinking is there a way to commercially um, boost these activities and generate a return, pay back the bond, and then the community continues to run their operations and prosper that way, right? So there are two aspects to it. There's the artisanal mining.
Yeah.
Um, and then there is basically agribusiness, food processing, energy, infrastructure that will be funded by that bond as well. So it's $100 to $200 million bond. It will pay back probably a single digit interest to investors. Investors will most likely be from Europe. But the idea is once those funds are raised, we organize people into cooperatives around different activities, right? So artisanal mining will probably consume about 50% of the bond, and the balance will be the more agribusiness and other activities like that. And then the culmination of the agribusiness effort will be to build a food processing hub in that where so if you're planting more corn and wheat and cassava and whatever, what's important is to have a place to take it for processing so you can actually make products from that and sell those products, right?
Yeah.
And so the return stream from all of that activity will be used to pay back the bond and but if you think about the immediate impact of that activity, it's job creation is the most obvious. But the second and probably more important is the community will be a shareholder in what's eventually built, right? So those food processing hubs will be co-owned by community trusts, and then the dividends that come out of that can then fund public good like schools and clinics and roads and things like that. So that's the general idea.
Oh, love it. At this stage where you are you able to share which bank is backing your instruments currently? Because as an investor, they would be interested in knowing. Um,
Yeah, so the banks is to be determined. So the bond is in its design phase right now. Um, there are a number of banks that will most likely be involved, but as of right now, it will be announced
oh
is the
yeah,
short answer.
yeah, no problem. Thank you for that. Oh, love it. Um, where do you feel the gap today between how stakeholder economics are structured at the financial level and how they are actually executed locally?
So I think the most most stakeholder activities are contained within CSR programs, right? Corporate social responsibility,
So,
um, which is fine, but there's an excellent academic, or I don't know if you would like to be called an academic, but Dambisa Moyo, who also happens to be Zambian.
yeah,
Um, she wrote a book some years ago called Dead Aid. And sometimes CSR feels like dead aid, right? Because you have a company operating in an area, they build a block of classrooms, they get big scissors and ribbons, and they do ribbon cuttings
Yeah.
and announcements. But those things, when the windows in the school breaks, who's going to fix them, right? Who owns that asset, right?
Mm.
Um, so I think the gap is in sustainability, financial sustainability. There's very little in terms of models that you see out there that ensures that whatever is done for stakeholders, for local stakeholders, for the community specifically, is long lasting, right? So what you have is, stopgap measures that work for a little bit, but then they're not designed for the long term. So that's part of what we're trying to work on, is to say, look, we're already doing this very hard thing of trying to build a world-class copper and cobalt mine in Zambia, but why don't we try to build an ecosystem that benefits the locals around the mine as well, right? So that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking to do is to build something that is uh, that will last, right? That will self-sustain financially and will be there for generations. That's how we're thinking about it.
So we're looking forward to seeing hospitals or clinics around the mining area, some schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a secondary benefit, right? Um, what we should look for in the next, say, 2.5 years would be, large industrial processing facilities, right? Both on the mineral side of things, but also on the, agribusiness side of things, right? So food packing, um, butcheries and fisheries and, fish processing, like cold storage, like those types of things, because it's from those things, because it's from those things that you can then fund public goods, right? Um, because if you think about how schools are funded today, people make a bunch of money, they pay the government a little bit of it, and the government builds schools and roads and hospitals and whatever, right? They're private schools, they're private hospitals, but um, in areas where we operate, no one's going to be able to use a private school or a private hospital, not yet, right?
Yeah.
So the goal is to build that base upon which you can then build the public good, right? So,
Love it. I'm not sure if you have this already, but I'll still ask it anyway. If you had a dedicated partner focused entirely on stabilizing local supply system and stakeholder economics, what would success look like for you?
so we have a person who leads our environment, social, and governance initiatives. Um, but we're also because we recognize very clearly that we're not going to be able to do all these things ourselves. We're a mining company. So essentially what we're looking to create is a platform for partnerships. And we will be inviting, um, you know, people from different areas. So, for example, experts in farming, in agriculture, in animal husbandry, in food processing, and so on, to come in and set up around, in and around our areas, right? Because that's how we think this is going to work. If there's a single point of failure, we're just doing sort of the vision mapping and creating the base,
Yeah.
the foundation. We want others to come build the skyscrapers, basically.
Well, um, What would successful pilot look like from your perspective if we had to test the structured aggregation and stakeholder model alongside your operation? What would that look like?
I mean, the success is all the first measure of success would be to raise the right amount of money from the bond issue. So we think it's a minimum of $100 million. That's a specific number because it helps to build things at the right scale. So like I said, a percentage, probably about half of that will be dedicated to formalizing artisanal miners, and the other into agribusiness value chains and food processing and so on and so forth, right? So success essentially means um, that each artisanal miner is able to generate about $500 to $600 a month in income.
Wow.
And that there's a very sort of calculable math around that. So, you need each person to be equipped with PPE,
Mhm.
and access to rotational equipment and training. And obviously, a willingness to follow HSE guidelines, health and safety guidelines, because if they don't do that, then they would have to go because we can't afford for these things to lead to accidents and for things to go back to the old ways that artisanal mining has been known to be, right? So success would be raising the right amount of funds and then executing by putting out regional storage locations, regional equipment hubs where you know Nancy the miner and her co-op of 24 other people might say, hey, we need an excavator for 3 days, right? Send it to us to help us bench so we can get access to what we're targeting, right? And then having a network of trucks to pick those up for testing and pricing and then payments on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So that, I mean, yeah, so that would be the model, and that's what success would look like.
Nice. What separates those who add real value and those who don't?
Doing. Simply put, I mean, so you said earlier that you've tried to source copper concentrates and things like that. Well, there's a lot of people who talk about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I think people generally underestimate how difficult it is to get these things produced, right? So, the general wisdom or sort of the general rule I tell people is if you find copper concentrate sitting somewhere and it's for sale, it's not real, right? Because it takes so much effort to produce copper concentrates that if it exists, it already belongs to someone, right? And if it's there and it doesn't belong to someone, it's because there's something wrong with it. It's stolen. Yeah. So I mean, there would be the off chance where maybe there's a counterparty that failed to pick it up or something, didn't pay or whatever. But that's a very rare occurrence, right?
One of, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who are looking to get rich quick, and both on the demand side and the supply side, right? So there are people sitting in New York who think they're gonna send, $1 million to Zambia to buy copper at a 30% discount. Like none of those things make any sense, right? I mean, the people in Zambia are not idiots, right? They know how to Google, they know what the price is. So, like, if you think you're gonna like buy copper at 30% discount, you're obviously just Yeah. Anyway,
That's it, yes.
yeah. So I think there are people. I mean, I think people who want to add value. There are people, for example, who go and they get licenses because they're connected, to somebody at the ministry. Um, those are I call them toll takers. They're like rent seekers, right? So you're not really adding any value, but you just want to sit there, collect a piece of paper. What I like to see is a local Zambian or just, wherever, someone that's local who gets their license and they start something no matter how small, and then, they keep pushing it forward.
Yeah,
So they're not just sitting and waiting for someone to come put in all the money and the effort. They put in their effort. There's a guy I know of in Nigeria. Um, he's currently one of the largest exporters of lead and zinc in Nigeria. He started as a mine hand, as a laborer, right? Like just a guy who dug in pits, and he noticed that, wait a minute, like the guys that I give this stuff to, they're selling to some guy down the road, so some Chinese guy. So it's like, hey, I'm gonna, you know, accumulate my volume, get, a few tons. Well, once I have a few tons, I'll go do the same. And then he did that and went back. Now he has enough money to hire three or four guys just like him and was digging alongside them. So now he's scaling his activity. Eventually, someone notices and says, "Hey, you're starting to deliver more and more volumes." And they gave him an advance payment of a certain amount of money. Nobody knows the exact amount because it's a story, so the number changes depending on who's telling the story, but it's in the millions of dollars, and it set him up for life. So my point is, there is work to be done. There's opportunities to be had, right? There's value to be added, but it's certainly not that value usually requires people who are willing to go to the ground, right? My industry is not one that you engage in from your corner office. You need to have the willingness to go to the ground and roll up your sleeves and get work done. So yeah. Um, so I think if we took a step back, right, and look at the state of the world, so what's clear is we've been talking for a little bit now about the green energy transition. We're going to need a lot more batteries, a lot more electric vehicles, green energy, wind turbines, solar panels. Um, all of those things are driving up demand for things like copper, cobalt, manganese, graphite, nickel, the so-called battery metals, right? So that's a big opportunity for people, for Africans, right? I mean, because Africa has been known to be a source for all of those things, right? So um, I don't know if the time horizon is necessarily 18 months, but the opportunity that I see is to spin up a series of medium scale mines. Now, I don't say that because I don't have ambition. I say that because I think that's what Africa needs. Um, if we have hyper efficient, massive, there's a mine in South America that's producing 1.2 million tons of copper per year. Um, that's not what we need in Africa necessarily. We need almost a distributed, a decentralized approach, medium scale operations, because you can then build an ecosystem, stakeholder prosperity, like we've been talking about, around each of these medium scale operations, which then ensures that the benefits are distributed as well, right? So people, the jobs are distributed. People don't have to all move to one little area and overrun the area, right? And because infrastructure will not be able to support the population influx and all these types of things, right? So I would say a big opportunity would be to be a participant um, in that growth in the number of mining operations that will need to be spun up in the next uh, few years, right? So copper is an interesting case study because there's a stat that says 750 million tons of copper has been mined in the history in history,
Mm.
right? But in the next 20 years, we need to mine the same number, right? So that's an opportunity for people in areas where these things are present, right? So I would say people should find a way to get involved, and getting involved essentially means finding the path of least resistance, which happens to be to enter the industry from the trading side, which is buy and resell. So, but right.
Lovely. That a little bit answers, I think it answers what I was about to say next, which is what you said on, I think, Cairo Forum stage, that Africa is having a feast and the whole world is sitting at the table. Being Africa, Africa is on the menu, and Africans are not at the table. How do Africans, I guess, get to the table? How do we find that table even? Because some people don't even know how to get to the table.
Yeah, so it's funny, I'm laughing because just maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, someone quoted that to me and
I loved it. When I heard it, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's true. Because everybody's talking about Africa, Africa, Africa is the it place, Africa is the place. But these are not really Africans talking about it.
yeah. So what I said was the world is having a feast and Africa is on the menu, and
Mm.
everyone is, they have their forks, their knives, their plates. Everyone's sitting at the table feasting, and there are no Africans at the table, right? So, um, how do Africans get to the table? I think it's a sensitive subject, I have to say. And it's unfortunate that it's sensitive. I don't know how far this is going to go, this podcast, but I'll say it anyway. Um, when an Irishman, okay, says, "Hey, we for the love of Ireland, I want to do X, Y, and Z. I want Irish people to do well." Um, People don't really blink. It's fine, right? And I just picked Ireland as a random country, but when an African says, Africans should do well and things like that, then it sounds radical in some way, and that's a big problem with the world. It's almost like starting. Africans are starting on the back foot because we're not expected to be at the table, and when we ask to be at the table, we're seen as being, um, you know, troublemakers, right? So, but at the end of the day, if we want to be at the table, we will have to trust each other more. And I'll tell you what I mean. So someone is going to have to go and dig these things up if we're talking about minerals. So I
Yeah.
spoke somewhere recently and I was talking about my multi-layered view of African wealth, right? So Africa's wealth starts from beneath the ground, right? There's a lot of wealth beneath the ground. Then if you move up a bit to the ground itself, African wealth is on the ground itself. So agricultural land, 60% of uncultivated arable land in the world is in Africa. Something like 65% of solar energy irradiation is in Africa. Then you go a bit above the ground to the brain, and you have a lot of young minds in Africa. The median age on the continent is 19. And then there's the fourth layer, which is our forest cover, which is it's its own source of wealth. We produce something like 3% of greenhouse gases of emissions. Yet we're almost 20% of the world's population, right? Um, and we sequester almost 20%, sorry, we sequester almost 20% of these gases, but we only emit 3. So that gap, that 17% should be a $1 trillion industry in itself, right? So I think someone's going to have to go different areas of expertise. You have African engineers in America, in Canada, in Australia. So clearly there's no competence problem, right? You have smart Africans everywhere, all over the world, in Africa as well, of course. So when people decide to lead the charge, the question is going to be who backs them financially, right?
Yes.
And with advice and with expertise, with mentoring, with all of that, right? Who's going to back them? That's how we get a seat at the table. You see a lot of people saying, "Hey, I just raised a bunch of money for my startup, for my business." The question is, where is that capital coming from? If it's not coming from you and me and owns, then whatever the owner of the capital decides to do
Yes, that's true.
down the road is fair, right? So the way we get a seat at the table is, first of all, just identify those of us who want to go lead the charge in different industries, and we back them and we support them, right? With policy, with money, with advice, with prayers, whatever, right? So it's a deep conversation, but it's one that yeah, I would say we just need to find those who want to go to the front lines and back them. That's what I would say.
No, it's a needed conversation. And when you said it, I think it resonates with a lot of us. And it takes somebody to say it out loud, because I think a lot of us think it and not, I guess, have the courage to say it out loud. And when you,
And I have to add another point.
yes,
I imagine you're a US citizen,
yes,
as am I,
yes,
right? So me saying this doesn't take anything away from the fact that I'm American and I want America to do well as well, right? Um, what all I'm saying is there's a way that the world has interacted with Africa, and it's been zero sum. You lose, we win. That sort of thing, right?
yes,
The whole idea behind the stakeholder prosperity thing that we're doing is to offer a counter argument to the idea of you win, I win, you lose, to hey, what's your win and what's mine, and can we both win, right? Because look, basic economics, right? Basic economics. If 1.4 billion Africans, whatever we are now, if if you got 400 million of them into the middle class, the global GDP is only going to grow. It's not a win-loss situation, right? Um, um, you can look this up and check as Chinese and Indians got out of, there's a few 100 million Chinese and Indians moved out of poverty into the middle class. I mean, look what it did for companies like Apple, right? For car companies, right? Because now you have demand from a new category of money, right? New money that needs to be serviced. They need fridges, TVs, and phones. They need cars. They need, solar panels. They need energy, right? So the fact that advocating for African prosperity is not advocating for anybody else to go down. It's like, look, everyone can prosper together. The rising tides, as they like to say, can lift all boats. But, even though, anyway, that statement has its own problems. But at the end of the day, I think we can be proud Americans like me and like you, who naturalized and willingly became citizens here. Um, we can want what's good for this country
Yeah,
and want what's good for Africa. And those two views don't have to be in opposition to each other. They can complement each other quite nicely, actually.
sure, sure. Um, Anything else I haven't asked that you would like to share? Because I think I've been firing a lot of
No, just,
questions. It's super informative.
I think ultimately my goal um is to get more of us into to the ground because that's where the value is. Let's go to the ground. I think there's been a bit of a miseducation of the African. And what I mean by that is growing up in Nigeria, there was a song that we sang that basically translates to if you study hard, if you go to school and study hard, your shoes will make a particular sound, right? And it's the sound of, what you imagine formal shoes would like when a woman is wearing high heels, her,
Yes, that sound it makes.
that sound, or guys, I mean, when guys are wearing leather shoes, it's a sound as well. So, I think those types of ideas got us thinking that success looks a certain way. Success is a suit and tie and a corner office and a car with AC
Yes,
and, all of that, right? But then if you look properly, right, the things that we run away from, the places we run away from, um, you go there. Like I've been to the most rural parts of Nigeria and you meet Chinese people there and then you ask yourself, what are they looking for that I'm running away from? Right? Is there a form of success that might lie in my blind spot because I've been told success, is Fifth Avenue or Wall Street or whatever, right?
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, ultimately, if Africa has comparative advantage and that wealth is in the ground, why would we abandon that, pursuing, a different idea of success and wealth? So anyway, that's a sermon for another Sunday. So
love it. Listen, this has been super informative, and I think we need to do the second phase when you have time, and if you could give us a second chance to come on once you have launched or announced, and we could see
yeah,
the success of the instrument. But would love to have you back and actually see what that instrument is doing and how you guys have been in, how everything is going in Zambia. But this has been amazing. I'm super grateful for you making time for us, and I can't wait to have you back.
all
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, happy to come back another time as well. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.